tried to improve upon from the first movie, make it work better for him. And, you know, the fans go nuts if you change anything on the costume, so we had to kind of be careful about that.
No designer just wants to just say, okay, let's bring the bat suit out of the bat closet. You know, it's like you're working on a movie. You gotta kind of go for it a little bit.
The first film had such a great look to it. There was no reason not to continue it.
On the second, we had the luxury of what we didn't have on the first one, which was time. And, of course, we had more money because it had already established itself as a successful phenomenon.
We had an amazing team on this movie. Bob Ringwood, who had done the first film, and Mary Vogt costumes. I mean, so talented and really adept at translating Tim's drawings and his designs into reality and making them functional.
Well, we looked at Art Deco toasters and vacuum cleaners, all things which for no apparent reason were aerodynamically designed, and tried to incorporate that feel of them. I mean, we got lots of photographs that we blew up and had around all the sculptors when they were sculpting, and it just the fact that the photographs it somehow translated itself into the things that they were sculpting.
Tim's thinking was to really make the batsuit a lot sharper and a lot slicker. Tim, I know, was quite keen for it to look like an Oscar, to have that kind of feel to it.
There was already a full-size prototype that was sculpted. It was a little rough, but it was a completely new approach. Whereas in the first movie, Batman had very much human anatomy on his armor. This new one was more sort of Art Deco-y, very hard mechanical lines and plating. So that was already pretty established before I came on, and my job was just basically to sculpt like the actual suit for Michael Keaton.
He had done it perfectly. It looked exactly like something you would have made at Ferrari. It looked like, a car designer had done it. And it was like, oh, he says, is that okay? And go, yeah, that's kind of exactly.
We start with a fiberglass body cast and then sculpting clay over the top of that, which will then make the foam latex suit. So everything that's in clay will be eventually in foam latex.
Take the sculpt, they mold it, and then they generate a fiberglass copy of it, and they go in there and they resand it and they polish everything up really beautifully, and then they remold that again, and then all the pieces were generated from that. So you get a nice smooth car finish. It's a very, very dense foam rubber, and they put a lot of black tint inside of it, so when you finally run the suit, it comes out one solid color, and then they take that and they sew it onto the spandex suits and in sections. They have to make 30 suits, because when it gets scuffed up, you're done, next suit. But with something that smooth and clean, it has to look pristine all the time. It's very difficult to maintain, so you just keep going through them.
I think what we did on Batman Returns is beautiful. I think it's a lovely piece of sculpture. And if it looks like a piece of sculpture, then I think that means it's worked pretty well.
You missed.
I love that costume. Absolutely love that costume. And head. It's beautiful.
The best role in Batman is always the villain. I don't even think that's contentious. I think that's just obvious. They get the best frocks, they get the best line.
Just the pussy I've been looking for.
Tim kept a notebook of characters that he designed, and he had some extensive ideas and drawings.
Original costume was meant to be the swaddling clothes that the Penguin was discarded in. That was part of the, what we started with, and then that evolved into, this kind of union suit.
I remember the first time I saw it, I was just blown away. It was not at all what I expected. It was not what was in the comic. But he had been able to take the truth of the character, trapped in a penguin-like body, and make you really sort of feel the anger and the pain of the character who has to be the Penguin. Some people felt like, ooh, he looks kind of too scary, or he looks a little too bizarre, too dark. But I think he was such a vivid character.
We made a bodysuit for him that must have weighed 100 pounds. I mean, it was not out of foam. We were experimenting with silicone, because I know Bob was saying that he wanted it to kind of move. It was such a miserable, horrible thing to wear. And we thought, how will we ever get this horrible thing on this actor? Well, he loved it. He said, this is so uncomfortable, and this puts me in such a bad mood. that this is perfect for the penguin.
Sexes are equal when there are blue sky.
Danny's almost unrecognizable in this, and there's a real freedom in that, actually. It's kind of fun to do, because then you really get hidden and you can kind of go nuts, you know.
Then it'll be another hour.
My suit was thick. My legs were like turkey legs, you know. Stomach was like, I was in there somewhere, but pretty far in there.
Yeah. I suppose Catwoman is the alter ego of Selina. Selina's, you know, a dreary secretary lost in a big city with no excitement in her life. And Catwoman's her alter ego. She goes out in the night, she avenges herself, she punishes men, she does whatever she wants, and she dresses in sexy clothes. I saw a photograph in a magazine of a sculpture that I think a German sculptress had done. And it was a woman's head and shoulders, and it was sewn together as though she was a patchwork, and it was the most bizarre-looking thing you've ever seen. It was very sinister and strange, but it's very sexual. And I took this photograph to Tim Burton, and I said, you know, I think you might like this. And, of course, he liked it a lot. And so the whole concept of the Catwoman costume actually grew out of this one photograph that I'd found by chance.
So what are we waiting for? Let's consummate our fiendish union.
What are you talking about?
Put the stitching in there to kind of represent her kind of patchwork fragmentation of her character.
I wouldn't touch you to scratch you.
We came up with the concept that her raincoat, her slicker raincoat that she had, that we established in the film, she cut up and in one night manufactured this fantasy costume for herself. The trouble with superheroes is, where do they get their costumes? You know, they're suddenly wearing this very slickly made costume.
Catwoman. Oh, God. Catwoman was hot. I mean, whew, she was so sleek.
We'd done a screen test, which no one was allowed to see us shooting. Mary and I got Michelle all dressed up. We painted her in silicone. We gave her the whip, which had a stacked 6-inch heels, and the face was done and everything, the makeup. And the next day, we had to go with all the heads of Warner Brothers to a screening room. And we were all sitting there. This image of Michelle came on the screen, and there was just stunned silence in the room, because there was this unbelievably, you know, obviously sexual image of a woman in black, shiny, hand-stitched rubber with stacked heels and a whip. And so I didn't know how to get out. You know, I was stuck sitting there, and nobody said anything. So I just stood up and grabbed Mary by the hand, and we walked down the aisle, and I said, "Not bad, gentlemen, not bad, huh?" And we walked out of the screening. It didn't have to look too slickly made, you know. It was actually made of rubber, and poor Michelle had to be painted with wet silicone every shot, repainted to get the shine.
The first time I put the outfit on, I thought, I can't walk, I can't breathe, I can't hear, I'm really unhappy. I can't act.
I don't think the corset was so much of a problem, because it was made by Phil Reynolds, who specialises in ballet and opera, and ballet dancers and opera singers can wear surprisingly tight corsets and still sing and dance. The process of getting the rubber suit on, not much fun, you know, it's so tight and a bit laborious, obviously very high heels. The mask was not her favourite thing, and there was a lot of adjustment had to be made so that obviously, as her face was moving, the edge could just pinch into her skin a little bit, and it wouldn't be very flattering. And I had endless fittings with her, and every time she saw me coming, she kind of thought, oh no, not her again.
It was decided that Catwoman shouldn't have a tail. So I came up with the idea that perhaps we could use a whip that represented the tail. And at one point we did consider it being worn on the back of the body, and she bought. So it was a sort of euphemism for her tail. But of course it became a wonderful sexual thing.
It took me a long time to get used to all of the elements.
Such a late mother.
Max, Shrek, and his son, they kind of look like, I think we did research on like J.P. Morgan and industrialists, turn of the century industrialists. They would have the big fur collars on and the Homburgs and really sharp suits with pinstripes and very strong shoulders and double-breasted. And then you had the Ice Princess.
Who are you?
Talent Scout.
Come in.
It was like a 40s Sonia Henning meets Betty Grable. Look about her.
Gotta go. Girl talk.
There was one segment of the film that was all devoted to specialty masks and headpieces and that sort of a thing for the costume ball. Bob had, certain concepts and ideas about what he wanted, this mask ball to look like, and then we would just basically follow through. We built, hundreds of these things based on architecture and animals and all kinds of things.
The Triangle Circus Gang had more like a 30s sideshow look. Warner Brothers had a huge collection of old 30s costumes from the old musicals that we grabbed a lot of those to use as patterns and just for inspiration for the Red Triangle Circus Gang.
I have to hand it to the actors because these movies are big and lumbering and technical, especially when they're having to dress up in weird costumes.
You'd get by 3, 4, 5, 6 days a week, and you'd be working, you'd kind of be lost in your work, and you don't pay attention. Then one day, you kind of stop, and you kind of forget about what you're doing, and look around, and we all look at each other dressed, and it just seems ridiculous and silly and great fun.